Have you ever wondered why the moment you stop caring, people suddenly start chasing you? It's strange, isn't it? For months, you tried everything, you texted first, you overthought every silence, you waited for replies that never came. You bent your time, your energy, your peace of mind around people who treated your presence like an option. Yet the moment you step back, something shifts. Suddenly, they notice. Suddenly, they remember your worth. But why? Marcus Aurelius once said, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." You don't realize it at first, but this calmness, this silence, becomes your greatest power. In a world where everyone is chasing validation, attention becomes the most expensive currency. And the one who doesn't beg for it, owns it. Our story begins with a man who didn't understand this truth, not yet. He was always running after others. Friends who never called back, a woman who always kept him waiting, opportunities that seemed to slip away the moment he reached for them. He thought if he tried harder, he could control how others saw him. If he gave more, cared more, maybe, just maybe, they'd stay. But they never did. Each rejection carved something inside him, a quiet resentment, a constant ache. Every unanswered message whispered one thing: you're not enough. He didn't know that the problem wasn't them. It was his attachment to their approval. He was like a man trying to hold water in his hands, the tighter he clenched, the faster it escaped. Then one day, it all stopped. It wasn't a big moment, no dramatic argument, no final message. Just silence. He woke up, and the exhaustion was too heavy to carry. He didn't care anymore, not out of anger, but because something inside him broke open and saw the truth, that peace is worth more than attention. For the first time, he didn't reach out. He didn't wait. He didn't chase. He simply let go. And in that stillness, something powerful began to happen. At first, he expected to feel lonely. But instead, he felt light. He walked outside and noticed the air for the first time in months. He heard the birds, saw the sun filtering through the leaves, simple things he used to ignore while waiting for someone's reply. The world hadn't changed, but he had. He began reading again. The old Stoics, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. Each line cut through the noise like a blade. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, Epictetus wrote. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And suddenly it made sense. He'd been enslaved by things he couldn't control, other people's feelings, opinions, their choices. Now, he was free. But freedom, real freedom, isn't about isolation. It's about detachment. That calm, grounded strength that says, I am whole even if you leave. And that kind of strength is magnetic. A week passed, then two, and just like that, they came back. The same people who once ignored him began to reach out again. The same silence that once hurt him now made them restless. They started asking questions. Where have you been? Why so distant? He didn't change to make them chase, he changed to stop chasing. And that's why they came. Because when you stop giving your energy away recklessly, people feel it. Your silence becomes a mirror, and in that reflection, they see what they lost. He realized something that most never do. The world doesn't reward those who beg. It respects those who remain centered. And so he smiled, not out of pride, but understanding. He wasn't playing games anymore. He wasn't pretending not to care to get attention. He truly didn't need it. That was his transformation, the moment he stepped into Stoic calm. And from that point forward, his entire life began to shift. His relationships, his career, even the way he saw himself. Because when you stop chasing, you stop losing yourself. And when you stop losing yourself, you become someone worth chasing. Why do we chase what runs away? Because we think holding on gives us control. But in truth, control is an illusion. He learned this slowly. The man who once begged for attention began to see the pattern everywhere, in his friendships, in his work, in the way he used to scroll endlessly just to feel connected. He saw how the world thrives on chasing, success, validation, love, recognition. Everyone is running, but no one asks, towards what? The Stoics believed that peace is not found in having more, but in needing less. And he began to test that belief in silence. Each morning, before the sun rose, he sat with his thoughts, no phone, no noise. Just breath and awareness. The quiet felt uncomfortable at first, like standing in an empty room after a storm. But slowly, the silence became a friend. It stopped demanding and started revealing. He noticed how his mind had been conditioned to react, to crave immediate responses, constant stimulation, validation disguised as connection. Now, he let it all pass. Detachment didn't mean he stopped caring. It meant he stopped depending. One day, a message arrived. The same woman who once left his words unanswered now reached out with warmth. Her tone was different, gentle, uncertain, curious. She wanted to know how he'd been. He read it, smiled, and placed his phone face down. For the first time, he didn't feel that rush of excitement or the anxiety of what to say next. He felt peace. The power had shifted, not in dominance, but in energy. He wasn't playing a game of who cares less, he had simply risen above it. He understood now what Epictetus meant when he said, when you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. He wasn't angry anymore, not at her, not at anyone. He realized people act according to their own nature, not his expectations. And trying to change them was like trying to command the wind. So, he stopped resisting life. He stopped forcing outcomes. He started observing instead. He noticed how peace attracts attention in ways noise never could. When you stop reacting, people get confused. They expect you to chase, to argue, to demand. When you don't, they feel something powerful, your absence. It wasn't that he wanted them to miss him. He just wanted to stop betraying himself to be seen. He became someone who spoke less, but his presence said more. He smiled differently, not the smile that begged for approval, but the kind that came from knowing who he was. And soon, others began to sense it. At work, people listened when he spoke. Friends who once dismissed his silence now sought his advice. Even the woman who once ignored him began sharing her thoughts, her fears, her regrets. But he didn't hold on. He had learned the truth. When you chase, you repel. When you detach, you draw near. It wasn't magic, it was energy. Every action, every emotion, sends a signal, and desperation is the loudest noise in the world. When you stop making that noise, people hear your silence. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." And bravery, he discovered, isn't about fighting the world, it's about facing yourself. He faced the urge to respond, to prove, to justify. He faced the fear of being forgotten. And when he didn't give in, something unexplainable happened. He felt whole. Days turned into weeks. He began to enjoy his solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. He started writing, reading, walking in nature. The simple things filled him in ways attention never could. He realized he had been chasing not people, but a feeling, the feeling of being seen, valued, wanted. Now, he saw that everything he had been looking for was already inside him, waiting for quiet to be heard. And the moment he no longer needed anyone to validate his worth, that's when the world began to reflect it back to him. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it for peace. And that peace became his power. The same people who once left him guessing now wondered about him. The same silence that used to haunt him now guarded him. He was no longer a man who chased love, he had become love itself, steady, calm, unmoved. He had finally understood the Stoic secret. When you stop depending on others to make you feel complete, you become untouchable. And yet, his journey was far from over. Because true mastery isn't found in letting go once, it's in learning to let go every day. What happens when you no longer need what once controlled you? For most people, silence is unbearable. They rush to fill it, with words, with noise, with distractions. But for him, silence had become a weapon, and a sanctuary. Weeks passed since he stopped reaching out. His old world, the people, the routines, the endless need to please, began to fade like an echo. In that quiet space, he rebuilt himself. Not into someone colder, but someone clearer. And then, as life always does, it tested him. It began subtly. The woman who once treated his attention as disposable started calling again. Her voice, once confident and distant, now carried hesitation. "I miss the way you used to care," she said. He listened, calm and steady. The words hit him like a faint breeze, not enough to move him, but enough to remind him of how far he'd come. Months ago, those same words would have pulled him back into confusion and hope. Now, they only revealed the truth. She didn't miss him. She missed the version of herself reflected in his constant attention. That realization was freeing. He had become a mirror, silent, still, reflecting truth without judgment. People saw themselves in him now. Some admired it, others feared it. His silence spoke the loudest when he didn't respond the way they expected. When they sought validation and found none, they felt the emptiness of their own noise. And it wasn't just her. Friends who had vanished when he was low suddenly wanted to reconnect. Colleagues who once overshadowed him began asking for advice. Even his boss, who used to dismiss his calmness as passivity, began noticing his quiet confidence, a steadiness that others lacked. He had not become louder. He had simply become unshakable. That's what silence does, it exposes truth. It shows who respects your absence and who only valued your presence for what it gave them. The woman tried again. She asked to meet, to talk things through. He agreed, not out of longing, but curiosity. They met at the same cafe where months ago, she once ignored him for her phone. This time, she was different, restless, nervous, constantly glancing at him as if searching for the old warmth that used to make her feel wanted. But it was gone. He wasn't cruel. He smiled gently, listened, spoke calmly, but without attachment. Every word carried that stoic energy, patient, grounded, detached. And she felt it. The more he stayed silent, the more she tried to fill the space. That's the paradox of energy. When you stop giving freely, the world suddenly demands it. At the end of their meeting, she said quietly, "You've changed." He replied, "No, I just stopped running." And that was the truth. He no longer chased people, moments, or outcomes. He moved like a river, flowing, not forcing. The world could no longer dictate his peace. In that stillness, something powerful happened inside him. He felt compassion instead of resentment. He no longer wanted revenge or validation. He wished them well, those who left, those who returned, even those who never understood him. Because detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love without ownership. You give, but you don't demand. You care, but you don't cling. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And as he walked home from that cafe, he finally understood. All his suffering came not from people, but from the stories he told himself about what their actions meant. Now, he had stopped writing those stories. He lived moment to moment, not chasing, not escaping. And ironically, that's when life began to chase him. Opportunities started appearing. The energy he once wasted on people who didn't care was now directed into his purpose. He worked harder, trained his mind, strengthened his body. He learned to replace reaction with reflection. The peace he found became his identity. And people were drawn to it, not because he tried to impress them, but because his calmness reminded them of something they'd lost in themselves. He became the one others sought when their lives fell apart. Not because he had the answers, but because he had clarity. And in a chaotic world, clarity is magnetic. He realized then that stoicism wasn't about being emotionless. It was about being unmoved by what doesn't matter. His silence wasn't empty, it was full of meaning. His calm wasn't weakness, it was strength under control. His detachment wasn't coldness, it was freedom. And for the first time in his life, he felt whole without needing to be understood. He had finally reached the place every Stoic seeks, inner stillness. But life, as always, wasn't done with him yet. Because the true test of peace doesn't come in calm waters. It comes when the storm returns. And soon, that storm would come, to test everything he had learned. Peace is easy when life is gentle. But what happens when everything falls apart again? One evening, months after he thought he had mastered his emotions, the storm returned. Not the storm of people, but of fate. A single phone call shattered the stillness he had built. His father was gone. Suddenly, all the words of the Stoics, all the calm mornings, all the silence, they were tested. The grief came quietly at first, then like a tide swallowing everything. He sat alone that night, staring into the dark, feeling the sharp ache of loss pressing against his chest. For a moment, he wanted to break, to scream, to curse fate for taking what he loved. But then he remembered something he had read 100 times but never truly felt until that night. Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it, but wish for everything to happen as it actually does, then your life will flow well. Epictetus. He breathed deeply. The tears didn't stop, but his resistance did. He realized he could not control death, time, or the will of the universe. But he could control how he met them. And so, he sat with his pain, not running, not hiding. Just being. The world had taken something from him, but it couldn't take his composure. He allowed the grief to pass through him like wind through trees. It hurt, but it didn't destroy. It changed him, quietly, the way fire shapes iron. He understood then what Stoicism truly was, not the denial of emotion, but the discipline of the soul in the face of it. In the days that followed, people around him began to notice his calm. "How are you holding up?" they asked. He simply replied, "By remembering what I can't control." And that sentence carried everything, pain, wisdom, and peace all at once. He went to the funeral, stood before his father's grave, and whispered softly, "Thank you for teaching me to endure." The sun was setting behind him, a golden light breaking through the clouds. And in that stillness, he smiled. Not because he was free from pain, but because he understood it was part of being human. The same woman from before came to see him there. She stood beside him quietly. For the first time, she didn't speak, and for the first time, she understood him. No words were exchanged, no explanations were needed. His silence said everything. They stood together in peace, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as two souls who had both learned how to let go. When he walked away from that graveyard, something within him had settled forever. He no longer sought control over life. He sought harmony with it. He lived differently now, slower, wiser, simpler. He woke up before dawn, not to check messages or chase meaning, but to breathe and be. He wrote in his journal each morning, "What is within my control today? And, what must I release?" That became his practice. He stopped needing answers. He started trusting timing, and everything he once chased, love, respect, admiration, began to flow back into his life naturally, like rivers returning to the sea. People came to him not because he tried to impress them, but because his peace was rare. They wanted to know how he did it, how he stayed so calm when life tried to break him. He would tell them softly, "By understanding that what I want is not always what I need. And what I lose is not always a loss." They didn't always understand it at first, but they felt it. Because peace is not something you explain, it's something you radiate. One evening, as he watched the sun disappear behind the horizon, he thought about everything, the chasing, the silence, the detachment, the pain, and the freedom that came after it all. He smiled again, not out of pride, but gratitude. He realized that every moment of rejection, every unanswered message, every silence that once hurt, had led him here. To stillness, to strength, to self-mastery. He whispered to himself the truth that had carried him through everything. When you stop chasing, you stop losing yourself. And when you stop losing yourself, the world begins to find you. He understood at last what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And now, his thoughts were free. He was no longer a man searching for love, he had become love. No longer a man trying to control life, he had learned to dance with it. No longer a man begging for attention, he had become the kind of presence that silence bows to. His story wasn't about gaining power over others, it was about gaining mastery over himself. And that is the greatest victory any human can achieve. Epilogue, the Stoic truth. In the end, he learned that the universe always mirrors your state of being. When you chase, it runs. When you cling, it slips away. But when you stay grounded, calm, and centered, everything that belongs to you finds its way home. So stop chasing, stop begging to be seen. Stand still, be silent, be the calm in a world addicted to chaos. Because when you stop chasing, they don't just start begging. They start respecting, they start remembering, they start seeing what you always were. And you, finally, start seeing it too.